Hello, good evening, folks. How you doing today? Welcome to this session, folks. In this session, we're gonna cover one of the methods that we got in English language teaching methodology, right? And this is the grammar translation method. So we're gonna talk about a little bit about its history, the theory, and the application in English language teaching. To start with this one, folks, I would like to listen to you. What would you do in that scenario? So I'm gonna give you 2 minutes for analyzing, for reading yourself, and for analyzing, and then tell me what would you choose? Which of those activities would you prioritize and why? And what are the challenges that you consider that you might face with either choice? Okay, 2 minutes more, please. Read, analyze, and then be ready, please. Para los que se están conectando ahorita, chicos, ahí tenemos un escenario, ¿verdad? Necesito que lo lean, lo analicen y después, ¿qué harían ustedes, verdad? Y al final del escenario tenemos dos preguntas. Do we have any volunteer for reading the scenario, please? Okay, I'm gonna choose at randomly, okay?
Teacher,
Mas
teacher, excuse me.
yes, yeah, tell me.
What do you say?
If we have some volunteers
Sorry.
for reading that and then provide the answer. Do you understand what I mean, right? Danixa, could you please read the scenario?
Okay, imagine you're teaching English to a group of university students who need to pass a grammar exam, but also want to communicate confidently with English speakers. If you had to choose between spending class time on detailed grammar analysis and translation exercise versus conversation practice and real communication activities, which would you prioritize and why? What challenges might you face with aided choice?
And based on your knowledge that you have, Danixa, which one would you develop first?
Okay, I think that I would prioritize conversation practice and real communication because I think it helps students speak English confidently in real life situations. I think that grammar can be taught during communication activities.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And
Yeah,
and
continue.
I think that focusing on grammar, students may know the rules but struggle struggle to speak fluently. And while focusing on conversation, students may make more grammar mistakes at first.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Camila, what about you, Camila?
I also chose conversation practice and real communication activities because it is important to know how to write and to
Mm-hmm.
know grammar rules. But if you want to communicate, you need to practice and you need to talk with people and practice and make mistakes to improve your skills and exercise all the time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Francisco, what about you?
Well, in my opinion, I think, well, I think I agree with them that grammar is important to notice it, well, not to notice it, to learn it and practice it. But I think it is also fundamental to apply it into real conversations because it is one thing to know what you are saying, but
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, teacher, there was no noise
Okay,
outside of house. Sorry, sorry.
don't worry.
It is one thing to know like grammar rules in general term, but it is another totally different thing to apply them, to know how to use them in a conversation, because you can reinforce them as you are practicing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Maciel, what about you? Thank you, Maciel. Holly, thank you, Holly. Ana Garcia, what about you? Which one would you prioritize first, or would you combine them?
Okay, from my point of view, I choose, for example, the first one, which is grammar exam. Well, I think that is more complicated, maybe for some students, because teacher, there are some rules or structure that you have to apply correctly,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that is more fundamental to practice a lot. But um, if you have a conversation with some classmates, I think that um, is easier because you can apply in in your daily life.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. As you know, folks, as you know, grammar translation method, it's one of the first method that has existed, right, in the English language evolution, and that's why that it's one of the traditional ones, right? So, but regarding to the scenario that we got there, folks, remember that nowadays we have to practice more conversations instead of grammar, right? So, but we can combine them. How? We can make role plays, we can make the interviews, we can make debates, and so on, right? So, and based on the content that you have been discussing, then discuss some of the sentences that your classmate said about that content, and in that case, we can correct grammar, especially those ones that are incorrect ones, right? So we can teach grammar inductively. So when we develop speaking, right? So let's move on to this one, folks. And here, and I got a question for you. Do you have some knowledge about where the grammar translation method came from? Come from? Sorry, nobody knows. So, as you can appreciate, folks, it actually started way back in the 19th, 18th, sorry, right? And it started in Europe. So, in some of the communities of Europe, in some of the countries in Europe, they started using this one. Remember that, I don't know if you got some knowledge about this one, but at that time, teachers were mainly teaching Latin and Greek, right? And the goal at that time, folks, and that year wasn't really to speak those languages. So the focus was to read the classical literature and understand the grammar rules, right? So basically, folks, they took this method and started using it from for modern languages like English or French. That was two of the first languages that they used when practicing this method, right? And what about the students at that time? They would translate sentences, they would memorize vocabulary list, and they study grammar rules in details, right? I don't know if you have seen here in our country, there are some public schools that they got that this, they love to use these traditional methods, right? So that's why it's called grammar translation. Why? Because remember, as the name said, grammar is first, translation second, right? And it was the main method for almost 100 years. So this is just a little bit of the history, how the grammar translation method started and it has been existed, right? On the platform, folks, you will find different types of documentations regarding to this method that you can read in your spare time, please. Now, what about here? Do we have any volunteer for reading that? It says, folks, I'm
Me,
gonna read it. Yeah, go ahead.
historical background and origins. The method developed during the 19th century as educators sought systematic ways to teach classical languages. Originally called the classical method, it was adapted for modern language instruction in the late no, in the late
18th.
18th. German scholars and educators refined the approach, making it the dominant method in European schools. By the early 20th century, the grammar translation method became the standard in most educational institutions. It remained the primary teaching approach until the mid 20th century when communicative methods began to emerge.
Yeah. Something that this is related, something that I said before, folks, and something important here that we have to highlight is that the development of this method that in some of the private schools, right, in some European schools, this method was adapted. Why? Because remember that something important that we have to take into account as a teacher is that we know, we have to know what kind of students do we have in the classroom, right? So what are the students need? And based on that, probably this method was adapted for teaching and learning the English language. Thank you, Danica. Thank you very much. So let's move on to next one. And here we got the language and learning theory. I don't know, folks, if you have read something about this method, or if you got some knowledge about this one, because we got something important that we got here, language and learning theory. What about language? So the grammar translation method, folks, sees language as a set of rules, right? I mean, grammar, right? Grammar rules, it's the main thing in that case. And if you know the rules, probably you can understood and translate the language. Speaking, and what about speaking and pronunciation? That was not important at that time, right? So the main focus in language theory, it's that a student know the rules, then they can understand and translate the text, the language, right? That was the main purpose of that. And what about learning? So the idea is that, folks, that learning happens through translation and memorization. Students learn by comparing the new language with their native language, so you can translate word by word, memorize vocabulary list, and do grammar drills. So something difficult and interesting at the same time, folks, that we can find, it's that it says that we can translate word by word, but remember that the grammatical sentence structure that we got. I don't know if you remember in some courses that I taught to you, I said that English and Spanish, at a certain point, the structure is very similar. Why? Because we got subject, verb, and complement, right? So it's similar to this one, but we got some specific rules depending on the grammatical function that we're gonna use, on the types of words that we're gonna use, right? For example, if we use adjectives, remember that the order it's totally different, right? And even there are some students that they think in Spanish first and then translate word by word in English. That's why that they say uh the pen blue. The pen blue, when a student says that example, the pen blue, it's the language was translated into was thought, sorry, was thought into Spanish first. You understand what I mean, right, folks? Thank you. Now let's see here that there's some core principles that we got here. Principle number one: grammar is the foundation of language learning and must be taught explicitly and systematically. That's one of the principles, okay? So what I said, grammar is the foundation, because remember that when the languages existed, so the most important was grammar rules, and then translation. So that's why this method had that name. The principle number two: vocabulary is learned through bilingual word list and translation exercises. And something important that I mentioned before, it was the memorization. So this is so important when we use this method, right? So we can memorize the word and then we can use it in translation exercises. It's much easier, no, when you learn by heart those words. Principle number three: reading and writing are prioritized over speaking and listening skills. Yeah, that was the two of the four macro skills that were focused when using this one, right? Reading and writing. Principle number four: the native language is used as the primary medium of instruction and explanation. The principle number 5, accuracy in grammar and translation is more important than fluency or natural communication. So it's another principle regarding to this principle 5, folks, is that when the student started talking the pronunciation, fluency, and some communication skills, they were not important at that time, right? Because they were focused on the accuracy that the student used in grammar and translation, right? Now, here, as you can appreciate here, folks, we got some learning activities and classroom techniques that probably you were experienced this one when you were in high school, and some of your English teachers used in that class, or you can experiment, right, with some students in the future. Let's see the first one. Grammar explanation and rule memorization through deductive teaching. Now, my question is, do you think that in these days, does Nicaragua have some institutions or schools that they use this method, folks, or some English academy that they use the memorization, something mechanical to the students to learn? I would say, if you ask to me, folks, I would say yes. Yeah, we got some of them, right? The second one is the translation of sentences and text from English to the native language and vice versa. A vocabulary memorization using bilingual list of and flashcards. Written exercises focusing on correct grammar application and sentence construction. I'm pretty sure, folks, I'm pretty sure that all of these learning activities and classroom techniques you you have been experienced, right? Even at university, especially when you were taking English grammar 1, English grammar 2, till to English grammar 5, right? So you were working on many sentences construction. You were applying the grammar rules regarding to all the grammar tenses that we got in English and so on, right? Another activity that we got here, it's the reading comprehension of literary text, often classical or canonical works, present sentences to identify grammatical structure and functions, and something important at the end, it's the composition, the writing compositions, right? Where the students, at that time, folks, let me tell you that when they were practiced a lot this method at the end, they were required, the students were required to write a composition where they have to put into practice the whole knowledge about the grammar rules that they have learned in the course. Do we have any questions so far?
Yes, teacher. Excuse me. Could you please explain us what is the meaning of parsing sentences?
¿Cómo?
I'm sorry, could you explain to me what is the meaning of parsing sentences?
Ese es como análisis de oraciones. Es
Como
decir,
por
yo
así
puedo...
decir,
Ujú.
como por así decir, dividir los elementos de la oración, digamos sujeto, verbo, predicado,
Exacto,
por así
exacto, la
decirlo. Ah,
estructuración, exacto. Por eso digo análisis de oraciones, ¿verdad? Que ya sabemos que cuando hablamos de o el uso de este método, análisis de oraciones, usar la gramática, ¿verdad? Especialmente cuando hablamos de los grammatical functions, o cuando hacemos el desglose, ¿verdad? De cada una de las palabras, ¿verdad? ¿A qué corresponde esto? Porque recuerden que no sé si ustedes han experimentado esto, chicos, pero cuando el estudiante domina lo que son los grammatical functions, se le es más fácil construir oraciones, ¿verdad? Automáticamente, diría yo, sin pensar en español, sin construirla en español, y pum, la construyen en inglés rápido. Entonces, a eso se refiere el parsing sentences.
okay,
No sé
teacher.
si, no sé si le respondí su pregunta.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Ok, ok. Hablemos ahora de los roles, tanto del profesor como de los estudiantes. No sé si cuando ustedes empezaron su secundaria, chicos, voy a decirlo en español esto, si cuando ustedes empezaron en secundaria, el maestro se daba a imponer como aquí el quien manda soy yo, aquí el jefe soy yo, y trataba de crear un muro imaginario entre el maestro y el profesor. Perdón, entre el maestro y los estudiantes. Nadie, ¿verdad?
De repente sí sucedía, pues, con profesores así los más estrictos, pero era como que la regla general de que los profesores eran la máxima autoridad en el salón de clase.
Ujú, exacto. Y hoy en día eso como que ha ido desapareciendo, ¿no?
Mm,
Ah, entonces, con respecto a este método, chicos, básicamente, ¿verdad? Este es uno de los roles, ¿verdad? Que se dice que el maestro es como la autoridad, ¿verdad? Como dijo Francisco, ¿no? Entonces, y acá, ¿por qué la autoridad? ¿Por qué el jefe? Digo yo, ¿por qué? Porque es acá donde ellos venían, pues, como decía él, ¿verdad? Explicar todo lo que eran las reglas gramaticales, proveían listas de vocabulario, ¿verdad? Y se corregían los errores. Inclusive, yo recuerdo cuando estudiaba secundaria y yo cometía un error en inglés, el profesor me, me interrumpía de inmediato y me corregía en el momento. Hoy en día no se puede hacer eso, porque recuerden que todo esto lo han venido adaptando, ¿verdad? Y el focus es communication, ¿no? Communications. Y según algunos expertos, ¿verdad? En pedagogía y en didáctica, dicen hoy en día, ¿verdad? Que si el maestro interrumpe al estudiante de manera tosca en el momento que está hablando para corregirlo, pues lo va a bloquear, ¿verdad? Dicho y hecho, ¿no? Entonces, y el estudiante, pues el maestro es el que habla más, ¿verdad? Y el estudiante, pues es el que escucha, hace sus apuntes, ¿verdad? Y pues sigue las instrucciones, ¿no? En el caso de los estudiantes, pues en base a lo antes dicho, ¿verdad? Podríamos decir que los estudiantes eran más pasivos, ¿no? Eran más pasivos, es decir, el desempeño, el rol del estudiante era nada más que memorizar, traducir textos, ¿verdad? Y todo lo referente a lo que son ejercicios gramaticales, ¿verdad? Ellos no hablaban mucho, inclusive por eso les decía que hay algunos colegios que todavía implementan esto, pero no lo plantean en el plan de clase, lo hacen como de una manera subconsciente, ¿no? Entonces el estudiante en este caso no habla mucho, ¿verdad? En clase. ¿Por qué? Porque él está enfocado más en la precisión de la traducción de textos de ejercicios, en la precisión de la construcción de oraciones y no en la fluidez, ¿verdad? Vamos bien hasta ahí, ¿verdad, chicos? Ok, good.
yes,
Veamos,
yes, yeah.
veamos algunas de las ventajas, ¿verdad? Y fortalezas de este método. ¿Quién me ayuda a leer, porfa? Una de las fortalezas es de que con el método se dice que se puede reforzar, perfeccionar la precisión gramatical, ¿verdad? La precisión gramatical y el comprendimiento, ¿verdad? La comprensión de las estructuras de los idiomas. ¿Por qué decimos language structure? Porque recuerden que en el caso del inglés y el español, pues ahí son bastante similares, pero si ya decimos español y ruso, pues ya ahí como que cambia la cosa, ¿verdad? Y no es por la complejidad de los sonidos, de las palabras, sino de la estructuración de las oraciones, porque hay idiomas que empiezan primero con el verbo o el objeto, después sujeto y por último el verbo, es decir, cambia totalmente todo. Y pues entre el inglés y el español no, ¿verdad? Como decía yo antes, ¿verdad? Subject, verb and complements, ¿verdad? Otra de las fortalezas, ¿verdad? Que podemos encontrar aquí o ventajas es de que se mejora bastante lo que son las habilidades de comprensión lectora, ¿verdad? Especialmente con los textos, ¿verdad? Ok. Ahora, las limitaciones que tenemos del método, ¿verdad? Neglects speaking and listening skills, es decir, omiten, obvian, ¿verdad? Lo que son las habilidades de speaking y listening, ¿verdad? Leaving students unable to communicate orally. Creates artificial language learning divorced from real communication contexts, produces students who can translate but cannot speak or understand natural conversation. Inclusive hoy en día hay estudiantes que se han adaptado tanto a este método que, y lo digo porque yo conozco a varios chicos de que llevan 5 años estudiando inglés, 5 o 6 años, y ellos se creen la mamacita de Tarzán en textos escritos, en construcciones de oraciones. Tantos tiempos que han estudiado, han perfeccionado lo que es gramática, pero cuando ustedes lo ponen a hablar, ya ahí como que ya empiezan a hesitating, ¿verdad? Tenemos otra, dice relies heavily on memorization rather than meaningful language acquisition. Aquí no, pues no, esa es una de las limitaciones, ¿verdad? Que tenemos que no se practica lo que son real world scenarios, sino que va más a la parte mecánica, ¿verdad? De memorizar, ¿verdad? Lo que son las reglas o la lista de vocabulario que se les da, ¿verdad? Tenemos discourage students' motivation through repetitive mechanical exercises, doesn't develop communicative competence or cultural understanding, ignores individuals' learning styles, and the importance of interactive student-centered learning. ¿Por qué? Porque se aplicaba bastante esto en gramática, la gramática en ese tiempo. En ese tiempo, pues, ustedes saben de que no existía lo que era la tecnología, así como está hoy en día. Por lo tanto, se iban a textos. Entonces, cuando el maestro estaba explicando, ahí ellos estaban concentrados 100% atendiendo, ¿verdad? Porque alguien que no atendiera la explicación, pues asumo de que iba a andar perdido porque no tenía la facilidad, ¿verdad? De acceso a recursos como tales para poder indagar al respecto. Entonces, ahí por eso se decía dentro de los roles que el maestro era la máxima autoridad, ¿verdad? Y en base a la explicación que él daba, que el maestro daba en ese entonces, pues en base a eso los estudiantes empezaban a construir oraciones, ¿verdad? A mejorar un poco la precisión gramatical, etcétera, etcétera. Tenemos acá The Modern Application and Relevance. No, no se quiere decir, chicos, de que hoy en día no usamos el método. Sí lo usamos, pero los combinamos con otro, ¿verdad? Porque al final el focus es desarrollar lo que es communication skills. The method remains useful for teaching grammar foundations and building vocabulary systematically. Many contemporary textbooks incorporate grammar translation techniques alongside communicative approaches. It is particularly effective for learners who benefit from explicit grammar instruction and analytical learning, and translation exercises remain valuable for developing precision and understanding nuanced language differences. The method works well in combination with other approaches in the blended learning environments. ¿Tienen una idea ustedes sobre qué es un blended learning environment? Eso ya es actual, ¿verdad? Allá en los años 1800, es decir, por el siglo XIX, antes del siglo XIX, no existía, ¿verdad? El blended learning. Bueno, esto lo vamos a hablar ahí en la próxima sesión, ¿verdad? And some educational contexts continue to use it as a primary method due to cultural preferences or resources limitations. Francisco, ¿podría decirme un número del 1 al 6?
4.
Okay, the lucky number is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maciel. Maciel Telles. ¿Podría hacer un recap? Un shortly and briefly summary about what do you understand about this session? Is Maciel here? Or do we have any volunteer for this one? No one, okay. Entonces, chicos, acá básicamente, ¿verdad? Hoy en día nosotros los maestros tratamos de combinar lo que es el Grammar Translation Methods, ¿verdad? Porque si se enseña de la manera bajo los principios que tiene dicho método, pues lo que se va a lograr es perfeccionamiento de precisión gramatical, ¿verdad? Perfeccionamiento de las habilidades de escritura y comprensión lectora, pero no lo que es habilidad comunicativa, ¿verdad? Ni auditiva, porque dentro de los principios esto no va, ¿verdad? Porque el focus es otra cosa, no esto. Y como ustedes saben, toda institución, hoy en día todo inglés, todo programa, se trabaja, ¿verdad? En base a los niveles de escritores, ¿verdad? El marco común europeo para la referencia de las lenguas. Y aquí este marco hace énfasis bastante en lo que es eh, speaking, ¿verdad? Listening and speaking. Entonces, lo que se hace es tratar de combinarlo con algunos otros métodos, que eso lo vamos a ver, ¿verdad? Durante vayamos avanzando, chicos, que estoy completamente seguro que ustedes tienen conocimiento sobre los diferentes tipos de métodos de enseñanza para el inglés, ¿verdad? Y ahí se van a dar cuenta que en base a los principios de cada uno de ellos sí podemos nosotros combinar, ¿verdad? Ambos métodos y, por supuesto, con el diseño, ¿verdad? De actividades integradoras, es decir, integrar ambos métodos como tal. Entonces, chicos, eso sería todo, ¿verdad? Por el día de hoy. Nos vemos mañana, ¿verdad? En el salón de clase ya normal. Mañana seguimos hablando sobre los métodos y pues cualquier cosa, cualquier duda, pues la aclaramos ahí, ¿vale? Si no hay preguntas, chicos, pues esto sería todo por esta sesión. Buenas noches a todos.
Buenas noches.
Teacher.
Have a good night.
Bye.